Dia here from I-49, and you're listening to the Kingdom Leadership Advantage podcast with Dion Van Zyl. Most business leaders come to us saying the same thing. They resign themselves to this idea that the more the business grows, the more personally demanding and all-consuming it becomes, invading every aspect of their lives and their mind space. But that doesn't have to be the case. Today we're talking about kingdom management, where we learn to lead from a place of active partnership with God. This simple shift can help you unlock your team's full potential, and it can give you freedom to do what you love most. Let's hand it over to Dion as he shares an excerpt from our monthly CEO call, The Inner Circle, where we help entrepreneurs and leaders solve complex problems in their businesses from a kingdom perspective.
So the whole idea of living a high-impact kingdom leadership lifestyle is that obviously it starts upstairs, starts in the heart of the Lord, knowing who he is, knowing what he's like, and then knowing who we're becoming. And that informs our leadership. Our partnership in the Lord informs our leadership, which drives our team. Make sense? So the top two, partnership and leadership, is what we do here at the Inner Circle. The point of the last element of team is to empower the kingdom leader to create a team of leaders. So that's partnership leads to leadership, leads to team. So I hope that gives a little bit of context. And here's why this works, because basically it turns triangles into squares. If you think of the upstairs, downstairs, there are some people are all upstairs, man. They get a prophetic word every week. They get all these promises. God tells them stuff, and execution is zero or very small. So we end up with an upside down triangle. It's all upstairs stuff and very little execution. And then we have the other group in the kingdom or in the church where we go this way around. We get a word once 20 years ago, and then we built a global movement. It's just massive execution, fantastic leadership, really know how to execute. And so our job is not to have one triangle or the other. Our job is to have a perfect square, just like what Jesus did, right? He said, I do downstairs what I see my Father doing upstairs. And then he said, and it will amaze you. And he talked about doing even greater work. So this idea that Jesus set up was the idea that we get to do greater works. So with that in mind, and just to bring some more clarity to it, really the partnership elements, the leadership elements, which are covered by Inner Circle, the key around what drives the partnership, I call it the command and control point, the inflection point, the point that really drives everything. That's the permission. We've often said upstairs permission leads to bold downstairs action. That's what makes the square. So the permission here is based on the inner territory. So over many sessions, we've talked right through the idea that you can only take external territory based on the inner territory you've taken. We've talked through all the dangers around when our external territory becomes larger than the internal territory. We end up in a situation where a lot of people implode. I personally think this is the reason why most ministries or most Christian leaders, even pastors, will end their lives not even serving the Lord, let alone being in the ministry. And the reason is when the external territory gets bigger, then the pressure goes the wrong way. So we always say we want to live inside out, but we don't talk and explain how that works or how to be with the Lord and how he wants to be with us in that partnership. So the partnership is everything. So the partnership sets the size of the territory you're ultimately going to take. So when Jesus said, come to me, all you're weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke, my partnership, on you and learn from me. That's where the learning happens, directly from him. For I'm gentle and humble of heart, and you will find rest for your souls. Then he said, for my yoke is easy. And we decoded that word easy. Christos in the Greek literally means highly effective and easy to us. It feels light. There's a lightness to kingdom leadership. And then he said, and your burden is light. Your part of the partnership should feel light. So if we find this place in our partnership with the Lord, it will express itself in our leadership. There'll be a lightness to our leadership. There'll be a restfulness to our leadership. And that's how we know. So how do we know we're in partnership? How do we know we've stuck inside the partnership? Is if we feel and functioning from rest. If we find ourselves in stress, anxiety, worry, we know we stepped out. That's what Jesus said, exchange the stress and worry, come to me and receive rest. Now, the Lord wasn't talking about a transactional rest. He was talking about moving into a new modality, to moving to the permanent state of rest. And now we act with bold action because our confidence comes from our permission. And then the last part then is, how do we train our team? Okay, because even if you're the only believer in your organization, training your team with the best leadership practices from around the world. So that concept there is a team of leaders. So where's the command and control point for training your team? Is that weekly leadership training. I know I stress this every single month, but 1 hour a week of investing in their leadership, not just productivity. Productivity is the wrong focus. When we invest in people and people feel safe and creative and start acting like owners, productivity goes up almost automatically. I think focusing on productivity is backward, in my view. It's not a kingdom viewpoint because we invest in people first, and then we train people how to be a team of leaders. So we talked a lot of that. So what are the command and control points? What is the pivot point? In my partnership, it's about permission. If I got a lot of stuff coming at me, if you've got a lot of stuff coming at you right now, hitting the pause button, saying, what's your permission right now, Lord? That just clears out all the noise, gets you to focus on one thing, and that's where it becomes very restful very quickly. Once I know that, then I use my cue book, I use my calendar to allocate resources and to prioritize the time. We're going to get into that today, to take bold action. And for my team, that once a week training, people say, well, I can't afford to pull the whole team together. Honestly, you cannot afford not to. Productivity can double, triple, or in some cases go 5x just by investing in people first. And it's an extraordinary thing. When your team believes that you're actually investing in them, not to get them more productive and get the most out of them, but actually investing in them so that, hey, if you ever leave here, we want you to be the smartest person in the room wherever you go. That's a huge shift for people. So this inner territory, what are we talking about? We're talking about exploring God's heart, his nature, and who you're becoming. The bold action is your yoke, your partnership in action. And team of leaders is to bring the ways of the kingdom to the benefit of all. So everybody benefits from God's goodness, whether they know him or not. And I can give you a little more detail for those of you who've been around a bit more. So if you're looking at the key elements on the side, so around permission and partnership, we address things like how to function from peace and what to do with promises and how to deal with provision and how does this feel easy and light and how does the high impact part work and the clarity of purpose. All that stuff is part of the partnership conversation. On the leadership conversation, it's like, how do you design your perfect week that facilitates your partnership? That's today's topic. So buying back your time, ebb and flow management, which we talked last month about. All this is about facilitating your partnership in the Lord, taking bold action. And then with a team, it's all about people drive processes. We talked about the firefighter's net and clarity of purpose and innovation, giving your team a feeling of cognitive control. And so that's that portion. So I just wanted to give all that context. So as we go through that together, you understand what we mean when we say your partnership drives your leadership, which drives your team. How does that sound? So the big mountain to conquer today is, I know a lot of us hang around similar thought leaders, and whether it's Simon Sinek or Greg McKeown or some of the thought leaders that really help us inform our downstairs leadership. And we love that. I mean, what's not to love about super effective downstairs leadership? But as we've just laid out, our upstairs leadership must drive the downstairs leadership. Otherwise, it's just one leadership idea after another, and you don't know which to prioritize, you don't know where to focus, you don't know what the Lord's doing. So when the Lord's giving you permission, the permission he's giving you also, then that permission will extend to your team. We're focusing on this. That is so releasing because suddenly there's this freedom. The senior partner is driving the show. And I'm not him. So that for me is one of the greatest aspects and one of the greatest joys in the whole process. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this lightness of kingdom leadership. So I'm going to postulate for today, and I'm going to call this lightness of kingdom leadership when you're functioning from rest, Matthew 11:28-30, if you missed the reference. I'm going to call this lightness mode. And here's the interesting thing. When you're in lightness mode, you can go into light speed. There is an efficacy that happens that when we come to a place of rest in the Lord, and we start to feel the lightness of being, when we feel that, wow, my burden, my part of this partnership is pretty light. When I start to feel that delight and that joy, suddenly I move into light speed mode. Here's the big thing I've been learning. It's like a seesaw, right? The deeper the rest, the more powerful and effective the light speed is, the faster I go. The minute I take it on myself, and you all know what I'm talking about, it's on me. I have to do this thing. It has to be hard. I have to work. I have to do my thing. And then suddenly the thing slows down again. So I found the way to speed up, the way to go to light speed is to go into light mode. I was trying to make it simple to remember, but that's how I think of it anyway. And so as you're going through this, so let's talk about three things quickly. One, what is this lightness of kingdom? What does it save you from? It saves you from feeling like you're on your own in this venture. I'm on my own in this business, feeling like it's all up to me, carrying the world on my shoulders. And when you feel like you're carrying the full weight and that it's heavy, guess where you are? Outside the partnership. There's no condemnation in that because it's easy to come back. And by the way, just so that you know, it takes practice to stay there. It's one thing to do this like little moment where, oh, okay, now I'm at rest. And then 2 hours later, I'm doing it all again. It just takes practice. So the Lord's super patient with your learning. He's okay with that. Grace covers our learning. And but here's the good news. What he wants you to know that is it is a permanent state of being. You can come to a point where rest is permanent. Second thing it saves you from is stress is part of the job. Well, it is if you're downstairs and you don't know the Lord, for sure. Then that's all you got. Then you can do all the stress management stuff. The best thing you can do with stress then, if you live downstairs, is do downstairs stress management, which are good. Sleep well, get exercise, diet, blah, blah. Those are good things. I'm not minimizing them. I'm just calling them what they are. They're downstairs. But the rest Jesus is talking about, the peace Jesus gives us, is the peace that is not like the world gives. How does the world give peace? It's fickle. It's based on circumstances being great. But his peace passes all understanding. That means when downstairs stuff makes no sense, yet you have peace, that's the peace he's talking about. That's what he's referring to. And this is why we have to learn the ways of the kingdom, not the ways of the ways of the world in leadership is, man, if you're stressed, you're just showing you're taking it seriously. You're showing how serious that. I know it's funny from a kingdom viewpoint. It's funny now. It wasn't funny then. So, because we used to believe this stuff, right? So the lie there is that, oh man, if you're a serious leader, then you're like on the edge of stress. Or I am so stressed. I got so much on my plate. And so the cool thing, it isn't your stress anymore because Jesus paid for it. So now it belongs to him. So it isn't even yours. You don't even get to claim it as my stress or my anxiety or my worries because they're not yours. The third thing it frees us from is it has to be hard to be worthwhile. We use expressions like, well, that's easy for you to say. Or we use expressions like, if it was easy, everybody would do it. It's only worthwhile if it's hard. Again, downstairs stuff we learned in the absence. But here's what it is. You know when it's worthwhile? When he gave permission for it. Because some of the times it won't even seem like the logical thing to do or the main thing to do. Some of you have made some pretty serious decisions for your business, not because it was the logical thing to do, but because the Lord said, do this or start that business. Last week, we talked about the danger of venture stacking, where the one venture pays the other venture. And I called the next day to talk to him a little more about it. And I said, here's the 3 problems with venture stacking. Number 1 is, do you have permission Number two, if your one company is funding the other company, it's cloaking the real risk involved in that company. It can't stand on its own feet. You can't see what's needed because it's being artificially propped up. And three is you usually are distracting or depleting your resources. It's one thing to say, that the one venture pays for the other venture. Now, I'm not talking about structuring yourself so that you can take advantage of a different market. I'm just saying that this idea that it has to be hard and difficult for it to be worthwhile isn't how it works in the kingdom. He's in it with you. The Lord's in it with you. So what does this open up for us? This lightness of being opens up a couple of things for us. Number one, three things. One is it opens up, you get to have a partnership with Jesus, being yoked. And it's an interesting farming analogy that Jesus used, because when you yoke two oxen together, if you have one big powerful ox and one little ox, and the big ox pushes, guess what happens to the little ox? Gets crushed, right? Because that wooden board that yokes them together, if the big ox pushes, it just crushes the little ox. And so in that sentence, in that invitation, Jesus says, it's okay when you learn from him. He says, for I am gentle. It's interesting that he immediately assures us that he's gentle. He's not going to push and crush you in this partnership. I love that. And he's humble. That means it's not like, I got to get my stuff done. I got my purposes. And he's not impatient. The second thing is that he asks you to cast his burdens on him, which if you put it back in the analogy, and I'm smiling because I just see how kind is the Lord. Not only is he helping pull us, but then he says, hey, I can take some of that burden on me. And that'll increase our push capability. So that's why the more restful you become, the more he carries everything, the faster you go. I have this impression of this little small ox, a bit scrawny, that would be me. And then next is this big, powerful ox, which is Jesus. And then the board doesn't actually touch my neck, but we're pushing together. And I think he's doing all the pulling. And it's so kind. He said, look, we pulled it together. I don't think the board even touched my neck. I think it is a bit that way. So we're getting invited to cross over into this lifestyle of rest. Why? Because rest is a weapon. Rest is your primary weapon against the pressure that comes on you as an executive, as a leader. When everything's coming at you and you can reset to rest, this is your secret superpower in the kingdom. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing is lightness is your part of the partnership. So the delight and the wow factor, I get to do this. I get to do this with the Lord. I love what I do. I think Bridget and I talk every day and say, don't we just love what we do? We love what we do. And the most important is we love who we get to do it with. And so what happens, and the reason this all works from rest is because the favor of heaven is attracted to Jesus in you, and you learn quickly how to let your favor go before you and prepare a way. Now, that may sound philosophical or a bit ethereal, but let me explain what I mean by that. You get to a point of such confidence in your partnership because the Father is relentless in getting you to a point that you are completely and totally confident in him. He will not give up on that. He's going to relentlessly pursue you until he's going to so shower you with goodness. He's going to so put you in a mode to the point where you become utterly convinced and your confidence in him is unwavering. And what I mean by that, when you're in that mode, you let his favor go before you. You're not trying to make stuff happen. You're just trying to keep up with what's happening. That's a great way to live. The third thing is we become highly effective. And the reason we become highly effective is because we enter friendship mode. Jesus said in John 15:15, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends, because a servant does not know what his master is doing. But I have told you everything that I have learned from the Father, and everything the Father taught me, I am teaching you. So when we realize the whole setup is the same way Jesus learned, he said he was about the Father's business. The same way Jesus learned is the same way he's offering to teach us. Come to me and learn from me. And so the deeper the rest, the faster you go. This is the end of the partnership session. Then we're going to get straight into the business stuff. Let's get into session 2, which is really getting down to the nuts and bolts, taking bold action. How do we do this? I want to focus today on calendaring and creating the perfect week. Many of you follow Dan Mattel, and I think it's a fantastic downstairs practical wisdom that he gives. He uses this phrase, design the perfect week you do not have to retire from. And I'm thinking, wow, that's a pretty good week. If you want to do this for the rest of your life week, that's a good week. That's a good design, right? And if you say, I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life, then it's a great question you should be having with the Lord about this. So what I thought to do is to share with you some of the best practices around this. So how do we design the perfect week or the perfect calendar for your partnership? How do we accommodate our partnership in our practical weekly design of our week? And I'd love to hear what you guys do, but I thought I'd kick off the conversation with what I do. And again, this is ripe fruit. You know what green fruit is. You've listened to those sermons before, right? Somebody did something a few days ago, went to scriptures, got some verses together, put some points together. We don't live that verse. We just know about that verse. And then you bite into that fruit and it's really bitter, green fruit. So what we want is ripe fruit. And so whenever you're sharing anything, and everything we try to share on these things are things that we have practiced for years, or things that we feel have taken hold in our lives. Let's get to it. So number one, I've learned two questions that have really changed my life. Sorry to those who heard the story before, but the way I learned this is I had to do this presentation, and I had to write about an 80-page when I was doing my private equity thing. And the person we were doing this for is very well known, and I felt tremendous pressure because of that. And at one point he was running for president, so I was feeling under tremendous pressure to do this incredible work. And they just dumped so much stuff on me all at once. And I said to Bridget, man, if I just work through the night and then work through the next day, by 5 o'clock the next day, maybe before that, if I just go flat out, get up really early, do the 24-hour thing, and then all the way into the afternoon, maybe I'll get it done. But for even then, the Lord's going to really have to help me. I'm going to have to get all the research just exact. I have to nail down the financial models, have to work, everything, and they never do in those things when you're trying to model out a business and so forth. There's so much complexity in especially what we were doing. And so I sit down to do my big plan. Bridget goes out and the Lord says, go and read a book. And so I said, you mean like for an hour just to relax? No, the Lord says, take the day off. And so you know how it is when you start explaining to the Lord in case he doesn't understand. So I went through that useless exercise, and Bridget comes back and says, I thought you had all this work to do. I said, yeah, no, I'm trying to read a book. And I was like reading a book. I don't think I was really reading a book. I think I was just half ripping out the pages. I was just, to say I was functioning from rest would be a complete lie. And there was nothing restful about this day. It was very stressful. And so I go through the day. And of course, I don't work through the night. The next afternoon, I get a call at 4 o'clock. The thing's due at 5. It's due at 5. I've written nothing, done nothing, written nothing. I get a call at 4 from the attorney who represents him. He says, oh man, we feel so bad giving you this call. I said, why? He said, man, we don't need that report for another couple of weeks. I said, really? He said, yeah, I bet you worked through the night. I don't know what you did, but man, we just feel sorry. We only just found out. So I put down the phone. I said, Lord, I wish I'd known that. I could have rested. And the Lord said, you did know that and you didn't rest. And then I learned I have to learn to function from rest. So now to circumvent that, I started asking the Lord every day, so Father, what are we doing today? Now I know the plan and I've got my schedule just like you, and I got all the stuff that has to be done on my to-do list, and I got my cue book and I got all that. But I want to know, what are we doing today? I want to know, what's the adventure with you today? Then I learned over time to add that to the week. So when we're starting the week, Lord, what's the big move for the week that you're doing? Because if you're giving me that permission, I'm taking some serious, bold downstairs action. So it just put me in so I plan out my week, but I'm kind of holding it lightly. So when I design my perfect week that's based on my partnership, I want to prioritize the thing that the partnership is calling for. So even if I've got all these things and the Lord says we're focusing on this, and I say, well, Lord, if we focus on this, I have to move other things around. And sometimes he just takes care of it, because one thing you learn in business and as an executive is that Jesus is a quickening spirit. By that, I mean, he compresses time. What you thought would take a month will take a week. What you thought will take a week, take a day. What you thought will take a day will take an hour. He just gets in on it. And Holy Spirit just pounds your brain with ideas and you get through stuff. Anybody had this experience where the Lord, you thought it was going to take a long time and then the Lord just compressed it down? Okay, you guys know what I'm talking about. So because of that, I know that he can compress my schedule and do whatever he wants. So here's what I do. I design this week out, and I'm going to show you that design in a second. And then here are a couple of best practices before we get into the practical workshop side of this. Once a month, I give the Lord 4 hours, one deep work session, 4 hours, just to talk to him about how am I doing? How's my leadership? How's our partnership? You know, I mean, I talk about it every day a bit to him, but then I take a moment. Why do I do that? Because sometimes we have to take a minute to acknowledge what we're learning, to acknowledge what he is seeing, and to see, and just to, you know, as you go through that review, things become even clearer. We'll discuss promises, prophetic words. Sometimes he'll point me back to an old prophetic words. By the way, prophetic words were given outside of time and space, so they're endless. The prophetic words do not have a sell-by date, so you'll keep them for the rest of your life. You know, there will always be an element of something beautiful in them. So we talk about my leadership upgrades. Lord, how am I leading? How's my leadership reflecting our partnership? You know, what's my growth? What's my upgrades? And then we'll talk about strategy for the business again. I found that once a month, working on the business with the Lord is better than working in it on my own. So that's the once a month thing. The once a week thing is I spend 1 4-hour session each week co-creating with him. That's a session in which we do stuff together. We create content, strategy, we work on new financial concepts, leadership, stuff that we're developing, that we're sharing in our group. Because of course, part of my call is to help others walk in their partnership. Part of my partnership is to help others walk in their partnership. That's my job, right? So that's part of what I do. And then the first thing every day is those questions, this kingdom routine. Start new every morning. New every morning. There's no accusation from yesterday. And so the thing here is to never allow yesterday's negative stuff, especially in the business, to compound into today. The enemy relies on the negative compounding like a snowball because he has no resources, or they're extremely limited. In heaven, we have endless resources. We live in abundance in the kingdom. But what he has to do is he has to rely on you to help him out. And the way he gets us to do that is to compound negatives and just let that compound up into something of substance, and then get you to add a personal pronoun to it so it becomes yours. Then it becomes my business problem and my pain and my whatever. And once he's got your personal pronoun attached, then his job is to make it a stronghold and say, you see, this is just how it's going to be. There's no real way out of this. So, and you watch that process happen all the time. Well, you know what short circuits it right off the bat is if you start new every morning. His mercies are new every morning. And what it does is it does Psalm 92 for me. Psalm 92:2 says, I declare his goodness in the morning and I thank him for his faithfulness at night, because I've experienced his goodness. So I start off with an expectation of goodness in the morning, and at night I thank him for the goodness that I experience. And my whole mindset is looking for goodness. I set an expectation of goodness. And then over time, Lord just keeps raising that expectation.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. As always, thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear more of this kind of content or submit a question for us to answer live, visit us at dionvanzil.com or check the link in the description.